welcome back to Agritecture's travel-free digital conference. I'm Ricky Stevens, Director of Digital Strategy here at Agritecture. And today, I am really pleased to be chatting with Yemi, who's the founder of Oko Farms and a New York City farming icon, an educator, and I would say aquaponics expert, or I don't know if you can be an expert in aquaponics as you've taught me, but you are certainly extremely knowledgeable and have taught me a lot about it. So let me kick it over to you for a little bit of a longer intro, and then we can get the slides started.
Thank you so much for that introduction, icon. My God.
True.
Now I feel like I need to live up to that.
Just be yourself.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this digital conference. I think it's so cool that you are, that Agritecture is doing a digital conference. It's so smart and so great. All right, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit about what Oko Farms is, or who Oko Farms is, and the work that we do here in New York City. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, so Oko Farms is an aquaponics company in Brooklyn, New York. We do aquaponics education, aquaponics farming, production, of course, because we grow food, and a lot of work around environmental stewardship and conservation. So we see ourselves primarily as an urban farming, education, and environmental company. In 2003, we converted an abandoned lot in East Williamsburg, Brooklyn, into NYC's first outdoor aquaponics farm. I believe that we're still the only outdoor aquaponics farm in New York City. We've certainly helped other people develop small aquaponic systems in their outdoor lots. But these are farms that are traditionally soil farms, or mostly do soil and have a small aquaponics section on their farm. We cultivate a variety of freshwater fish and vegetables together in the closed loop ecosystem known as aquaponics. We chose aquaponics, or we choose to be an aquaponics company, because it allows us to demonstrate this system, integrated system of agriculture that allows us to grow food, you know, both fish and vegetables, in small urban spaces while saving water. So we're really attracted to the idea that you can do two different types of crops in the same piece of land, in a place like New York that is so land scarce, and also save water at the same time. And the water piece is a really big one for us. We understand that water is a scarce resource and is becoming increasingly so in very many different parts of the world. In India, in parts of Africa, and even in the United States. There are parts of the United States right now that are having issues with drought and water access. So aquaponics allows us to practice this form of agriculture that actually recycles water and uses about 80% less water than soil. And because it mimics a natural closed loop system that you can find in any natural body of water, it really gives us an opportunity to also educate the public about the health of our oceans and other natural bodies of water. And it's something that gives us an advantage over soil farmers, because we get to talk about the ocean. We get to talk about fish and what's happening in natural bodies of water. People always ask us the question, why farmed fish instead of just going for wild caught fish? And we can have conversations around that and what that looks like, and is it ethical or not ethical? Is it healthy or not healthy? And what does it look like for us to continue to take fish out of the ocean to feed themselves? So our mission is to practice and promote aquaponics as a sustainable farming method that mitigates the impact of climate change and increases food security for New York City residents. And hopefully not just New York City residents, but people around the world who are living in areas with drought. I'm currently working on a project in Senegal, specifically around water scarcity. And then also important to us is spreading the knowledge and skills required to practice aquaponics farming. So we educate children, we educate adults, and we try to reach as many people as possible, regardless of racial or socioeconomic backgrounds. I find that in neighborhoods or in communities with limited access to fresh food, aquaponics can be a real advantage. People can grow food aquaponically either indoors or outdoors, and can really do aquaponics on a small scale if they choose to. I actually think it works really well on a small scale. So we implement our mission by trying to accomplish a variety of goals. One is to increase food security, to engage the public. Public engagement is huge. I think that any kind of farming that is about environmental conservation and organic practices really must engage the public, because it is important for the public to understand how it works so that they can advocate for more of that. We do a lot of research in aquaponics. There's a lot of room for research, and we do different kinds of research. I'll talk about that in a minute. We do practice aquaponics from a permaculture principle, and we also work very much to promote biodiversity, which is why we're an outdoor farm. So education and research. We collaborate with different educational institutions. Current collaboration that started last year and is continuing is collaboration with NYU's Animal Behavior Studies program. In this picture, that is Isabel. She worked with us all through last year and be working with us again this year. And what we've been doing is try to understand better how to raise fish in a way that is humane and recognizes their emotional and cognitive well-being, which again is a field that is very new in aquaponics. This is not something most fish farmers are aware of or even be necessarily interested in, because if you're doing this on a commercial level, you're just interested in getting your fish to harvest size. However, there are some great advantages in being able to understand their emotional and mental welfare, because it reduces their stress and it does allow you to have a better yield at the end. If your fish are doing well, you're spending less money and time on treating them for diseases or other stress-related ailments. And then we also work with schools. We have, this is a cute little picture here that a kid drew. So we do a lot of education also with younger people, with with elementary schools through through college. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that again. We work with schools from elementary, I would say first, second grade, through college. And what we do with the students vary. We try to integrate research into all of the work that we do with our students as well. Food security, of course. We grow food. We try to grow as a wide variety of food as possible in aquaponics, and some of that is also integrated into research. We understand that in the communities we live with, there are different types of vegetables that people want to eat and are familiar with. So we try to grow vegetables that speak to people's cultural background. But it's not enough to just grow food for people. In order to provide security or to give people tools to make themselves food secure, we also help build aquaponics farms for community organizations and schools and anyone that's interested in feeding their communities. I actually think this is more powerful than growing food to give people. Giving them the tools to be able to grow food for themselves is a lot more powerful. And then I talked about public engagement before. We do tours on our farm. So beyond schools, we also bring people onto the farm to see what we're doing, to understand how we grow food and why. And we do talk about some of the things that we think could be improved in the way that aquaponics is practiced. And we welcome ideas from people of all backgrounds. And then promoting ecological biodiversity. This is an interesting one because a lot of people don't realize this, but because we are a water farm, essentially we're an aquatic farm, and we're outdoors, we naturally attract a lot of pollinators because what these guys are looking for is water. If you're ever building a pollinator farm, the first thing you're going to learn is that you need to have water access for the pollinators. If you don't have water access, they won't stay. They may show up every now and then to help pollinate your plants because the flowers and the do attract them, but they need water. We naturally attract these guys because we have so much water. So there's a lot of room for aquaponics to help increase ecological biodiversity. This guy here that we're looking at is a dragonfly. And they like to lay their eggs in water and are also great at getting rid of mosquitoes. So that's like a double whammy for us as far as biodiversity is concerned. So they're not necessarily pollinators, but they're helpful in terms of helping us reduce mosquitoes on the side. And we have everything from carpenter bees to honeybees to bumblebees and a bunch of other pollinators that, and wasps and different things that I'm still learning to recognize. And this is just, you know, these permaculture principles that we try to live by. Some of it we've been doing it without realizing we're doing it, and some of it we're trying to focus on more intensely. So things like, you know, integrating nature into your work. And I mean, our farm is literally about integrating fish and plants and recycling waste to grow food. We're trying to use renewable resources as much as possible. We're outside so that we can take advantage of the sun. And we're also looking to shift to running our system on solar energy and seeing how that works and how that may work. It's been an interesting journey trying to see how to make that work, and looking into developing countries that are that use solar power. I've been learning a lot from them. Biodiversity, of course, designing from pattern to details. The huge one for us is really observing and making decisions based on our observation of nature. So I just thought I would put that in there. Some of these things we're really good at, some of it we're not, or we're trying to get better at, I will say. But we certainly care about the earth, and we want to make sure that our farm respects that and respects the earth. We're reducing waste, we're recycling water, we care about people, definitely, and we care about the animals that we're also raising. And we want to make the knowledge and skills around aquaponics to be as accessible to everyone as much as possible. So sharing knowledge is big for us. And that's it. I think I should stop there now. Covered a lot.
That was a great introduction. I like that.
Thank you so
Seeing
much.
that, that's a new, I guess for background for the audience, you and I have known each other for about 3 years or so, and we've done a lot of workshops and tours of your farm together. So I've seen you present dozens of times, but this is a new presentation. I like it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so why don't you stop screen share? We'll go back into split screen here. Perfect.
Okay.
I want to start talking maybe off that last point on the permaculture approach that you have and the very low tech approach that you have. You know, a lot of people, when they hear aquaponics or hydroponics, they immediately think that means, oh, you must be, you know, a high tech farm. And there's certainly are examples of aquaponics or hydroponics facilities that are using a lot of technology, but yours is not. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about, you know, break down that misconception a little bit for me as to how somebody could set up a hydroponics or aquaponics in particular farm without much use of technology, and how do you do that at Oko Farms?
So one of the things that drew me to aquaponics, interestingly enough, was I went to the first aquaponics conference. I'd heard about aquaponics and I'd been doing it on a small scale, but what made me decide that I absolutely needed to do it was going to the first aquaponics conference in 2011, I believe, and hearing a gentleman stand up and say, "Hey, I'm German. I was born, I was a child really during World War II. I come from a family of 10 kids, and we grew up hungry. We were starving. And I've spent my whole life being traumatized by that experience. And one of the ways that I've been working through that is making food accessibility a priority for me, making sure that other people are able to be able to feed themselves when it's necessary." And he turned out to be the founder of an organization called Morningstar Fishermen. And what they do is literally go into remote parts of the world and not just build aquaponic systems, but teach people how to set up their own aquaponic systems and manage them. So I've always had this approach to aquaponics that is really about making food accessible to people. And you cannot do that if you're using a lot of technology. You know, the knowledge and the skills to practice it is not possible for a farmer in Senegal that has maybe only up to like a third grade education, you know? And if we're talking about feeding people, we need to make sure that the tools to do that are as accessible as possible. And so that really inspired the farm, bringing it outdoors to show people that if you don't have space inside, but you do have an outdoor space, you can grow food. We literally built the farm by just digging into the ground and lining the ground with lumber and pond liner. Again, that's simple. That's something anybody can do. You don't need a lot of money to be able to do that. You just need either a lot of people with good backs or a bobcat, you know. We do use electricity and we're trying to get away from that right now. And then we have like very minimal plumbing, you know, plumbing that's really simple and easy to understand. I always explain to people that plumbing is like Legos. And that really informs me is if right now, you know, we're living through this global crisis and people are freaking out about food and hoarding food. But if you had the skills to grow your own food, you wouldn't be freaking out so much and you wouldn't be afraid of food running out. I hear people all the time talking about how food is running out, food is running out. Like that's, I don't think food is running out, but people are anxious about food running out. If you know how to grow your own food, it wouldn't be so stressful, you know. And if it took millions of dollars and really expensive technology to do that you wouldn't want to grow your food. And if we're going to compete, not to say that we're competing, but if we were going to compete with traditional soil that is so water intensive, we also need to show people like, hey, this is the reason why you want to shift to this type of farming. You know, it saves water, it saves resources, and it's, you know, you can do it yourself. Anyone can do it. It's pretty easy. So that's our approach, is as simple and as minimalist as possible. And it is possible to do aquaponics on a really minimal basis, you know. That's the beauty of it, is that you can integrate tons of wonderful technology if you want, or you can make it really simple. It works on both ends. So nothing against the high tech, but if your goal is really to get food out there for people, you can do that without using a lot of technology.
Yeah. So just to dive into some details, you mentioned that your farm does use a bit of electricity.
Mhm.
Um, what are the main, where does that electricity go towards?
So the main electricity draw is our pump, our submersible water pump that pushes water. So we have, what is it, about 10,000 gallons of water on the farm, approximately. And we have a pump that, you know, in aquaponics, you just need to circulate the water in your fish tank, really. So we have a pump that uses about 155 watts. I think that's the energy used. And it pushes water from our fish tank, and then gravity does the rest. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but we integrate gravity into our system so that that, you know, 155-watt pump is able to push water. The other,
That drives the water in your entire farm, that one pump.
yes,
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. So no matter what, you're going to need a little bit of energy use, but you can get that down to, I mean, you're talking about versus some of these, certainly if you're an indoor or controlled environment farm, you're talking about a negligible energy amount versus some of these indoor farms where you have to consider HVAC usage. And if you're fully indoors, you have to consider lighting. So,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, and we are saving a lot of money by being outdoors. It also means that, hey, we don't operate in the winter.
Right.
So that's another thing that we need to take into consideration. We're expanding to a new site and we're going to be greenhouse, fully covered greenhouse, so that we can extend our season as much as possible. And then maybe also think about growing different things, maybe shifting to microgreens or something in the winter, or like baby greens, just to be able to continue to provide food year round and to show people who live in climates like ours that you can grow food year round and just shift what you're growing.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned education a lot. It's a key component of what you do at Oko Farms. How is it though that you're able to keep, from just a financial standpoint, keep your farm operating with the unique model that you have, where it's a heavy focus on education? How does that work to be able to continue operations if you're not focusing so much on selling the produce?
Right. Interestingly enough, most people come to us for the educational component. So it's turned out to be more lucrative for us than selling produce. The truth is, in order to be able to make money selling produce, you need to be growing on a really large scale. And a small New York City farm really cannot compete on that level. We're lucky to have people who do purchase our produce. But it's still not enough. That's the sad reality of agriculture, is that it needs to be done at scale in order for it to be profitable. So the education component is the actually more lucrative aspect for us. People want to learn about aquaponics. When we first built the farm, I didn't think anybody knew what aquaponics was, or necessarily, not that they didn't care, but it was just so new. Most people knew what hydroponics was, and everybody thought we were building a hydroponics farm. And I kept going, no, it's aquaponics, just fish. And by year 3, people were reaching out. We initially didn't think we would have educational programming. We just thought, we'll open the farm, we'll make the farm accessible to people so people can see what aquaponics looks like. We want to demonstrate aquaponics to folks. We'll sell produce, but anybody can come in and see what we're doing and understand what aquaponics is, and understand that it is a sustainable way to grow food. And then teachers started reaching out and saying, we want to bring our students, and we want to learn. And folks started reaching out to saying, do you do workshops? We want to learn this. And I decided after year 2, like, oh, this needs to be a thing. Obviously, there's a need here that we can serve and we should be serving. So we need to create a formal structure around education so that people aren't just walking into the farm and then walking out. Like, what are you learning? Like, let's make this more structured. And then we have people who are also interested in setting up aquaponic systems for themselves. And then there's a training component that goes into that. And that's turned out to be lucrative as well. So, I mean, it's all, with any farm, I believe that in order for your farm to be truly financially sustainable, having different revenue streams is really important. So it's like selling fresh produce, selling value-added stuff, selling, making workshops available for people. What else do we do? Public events. Having different revenue streams is what has helped keep us going. So it's not just the education itself or just selling produce. It's a combination of all of it that helps keep us financially viable.
And you did, I remember, you showed me pictures before of the first year or 2 where you were essentially like a basil farm, right? You were growing,
oh my God, yes.
Selling to restaurants.
Yes.
And so you learned kind of through the failure in some senses of that, or the challenges, I should say, because it grow, but you had a lot of challenges from that, right?
We did. So the first thing was, it was so great to be able to grow one thing and just like give that one thing to a restaurant, just sell that. We're doing an average of 30 pounds of basil a week to Roberta's.
Wow.
It was wonderful. It was so easy. We were delivering 3 days a week. It was excellent. And then their kitchen manager changed. Yeah, she quit and somebody else came in and then decided that they were going to purchase from someone else. So that was something that was completely unexpected for us, and we weren't prepared for, because we planned with the former kitchen manager for the season. And then she leaves just before we were ready to start harvesting and delivering to them. So that was painful. The other thing that had been happening slowly before that was we developed downy mildew in our basil. So monocropping had led us to this like horrible disease that we couldn't get rid of, and was actually less and less possible for us to continue to provide the basil at the rate that we've been providing it. So those two things were happening at once, kind of happened at the same time. And then it got me thinking, definitely monocropping is not the way to go, because if we had something else to offer other people, then we wouldn't have like literally all this basil to sell and like be scrambling to look for a buyer for all the basil. B, if we had other things we were growing on the site, we also wouldn't be so devastated if the basil or whatever crop the basil was diseased, right? Because downy mildew is actually a fungal disease that ends up in your system. It happens everywhere. It's actually an issue in New York City right now in general. Most sites that grow basil are dealing with downy mildew. I thought it was because we were an aquaponics farm, but it turned out that it's just everyone else is dealing with it. But when you have other things that you're growing, it won't matter, right? Because you have other crops that you can depend on. The third thing was people would come to the farm and be like, so aquaponics only grows basil?
That bothered you?
Yes, a lot. It really did. And I said, wow, people come in here and walk away with the idea that all of this is just to grow basil. And I can't let people walk away with that. For 90% of people who come to our farm, the first aquaponics farm they see or aquaponics system they see is ours. And to walk away with the impression that it only grows basil, it's not good at all. Yeah. So I started to make the shift around that is I will continue to grow some basil, shift from Genovese basil, and try to find other varieties of basil that will work, that are less prone to downy mildew. And then also start to really do some research and see what other crops can actually be grown in aquaponics. Because again, if we're talking about feeding people, even if it's feeding people on a small scale, even feeding a family, you do need a variety of crops. You can't just do basil or just like to grow things that are caloric dense, so to speak. So we've been trying to do grains. Can you grow grains in aquaponics? We've done rice. We're sorghum. I want to try at some point corn and maybe even wheat. I don't know, just to see if it'll work. And then we've tested okra, and we've tested just different kinds of vegetables. And then I want to do sweet potatoes to see how that will do in the system. Right.
Yes.
I think to
convince different varieties of rice as well that I've seen.
Right. And different varieties of rice. I think this year we're doing 3 different varieties. So increasing varieties as we go along and see which ones work best in aquaponics. Yeah. So I loved monocropping. So simple. My crop plan for the year was just basil. I didn't have to think too much about that. And then you just stagger your planting and harvesting. But I learned some really interesting lessons on that path, and we certainly will not do monocropping again.
And I think the thing I've learned from you in this is just how valuable it is to align your business model as a farm with where your strengths and curiosities lie. So for you, you are such an experimenter, and you're also an incredible educator. And so you've done a brilliant job of aligning those two things that you're super passionate about with your business model. And I think that's something that other people can learn from. Of, you also have a background in education, right? So
Right. Right.
it's hard. I want to point out that it's not easy to be training people on a complex form of farming, and you're training, kids starting at age 6 all the way up through 18 plus, and adults as well.
Yeah.
So it helps that you have a serious strength and background in that, in education. But for other people that might have, similar strengths, how can you align those with who your audience base is, or who your customers are?
Right. I think that the first thing is recognizing what your strength is and building to that. And we all have different strengths in different areas. So, and then understanding why, also being clear about why you're doing this work in the first place. I think that's the thing. I did this holistic farm planning with an organization called Grow NYC. And the first thing they ask is like, what do you want out of this? What do you want your experience with this work to look like? It's going to be hard and it's going to be challenging. And at the same time, you have an opportunity to decide like what you want that experience to be like. So if you're someone who is like, hey, I just really want to work with chefs, then, develop relationships with chefs and make that be your strength, and design your farm in a way where you're accessible to chefs, and it's understand how chefs work and what they want and what they need and how often they need produce. Some chefs are really creative, and they want you to have as many different varieties of things as possible. Some chefs want like very basic things, but the most important thing is to understand them and understand what their needs are, and then play to that. If you're someone who is really into technology, then play to that strength. What are the advantages that that having knowledge about technology, what does that bring for you? Think if you're in a controlled environment and you have technology at your disposal, there are some strengths you have that those of us who are outside just don't have. You're able to make crops available to people at certain times. You can manipulate the temperature. You have the ability to grow year round. With those of us on the outside grow, if there's a storm outside, that gives you an incredible advantage because your produce is not damaged by environmental factors. So just think about what you want to do, or what you want your experience to be like. Some people don't want to be outside in the heat, or in the rain or in the cold. So understanding that about yourself, you're like, all right, so that means my farm is going to be inside. And then you need to sell the fact that you're inside and make that your strength. You sell that to people. Hey, there will always be food available, regardless of weather, regardless of, viruses. And it's just, it's understanding what your strengths are and playing to that. That's the biggest part. My strength is I'm a good teacher. Yes. And I didn't know that I was until people started saying it. And I thought, okay, you need to take this seriously. And my strength is also, I have this I'm very curious. I'm driven by curiosity. So I love to play with food is what I call it. So I do have relationships with a few chefs where we're like, they're like, I think you should grow this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I think I should. Because it's interesting. It's interesting to them and it's interesting to me. And at the same time, I can tell people, yeah, that works in aquaponics, or no, that doesn't work in aquaponics. I let my curiosity drive me. And everyone should find what it is that is most important to them and let that drive you.
I love that. That's a great message. All right, so I have 2 last quick questions for you. But first, just from that, for those watching on YouTube, drop in the comments if you are thinking about starting a farm, or you're really interested in aquaponics. Drop in there maybe some of the things that you're weighing, these different considerations. Tell us about your strengths and ask any questions, and Yemi or someone on the agritecture staff will try to answer them. Okay, so last 2 quick things. Can you give us just maybe one story of like one of the toughest moments or lessons that you learned from Oko Farms, and what's then a happy memory that you have?
Toughest moment. Um, I want to say that our one of the toughest moments that stands out in my mind is our first year when we lost our tilapia,
Mm.
because we were completely unprepared and didn't do research. So we were naive. My partner at the time and I, we thought everything we'd learned so far in aquaponics had been about tilapia. You raise tilapia, grow tilapia, but what we didn't fully comprehend is that are tropical, right? We understood that. But we're like, yeah, well, and we'd read some things that said they can survive up to 55 degrees. So if we could maybe heat our water to 55 degrees, again, you're outdoors, you have 10,000 gallons of water. How are you going to properly heat the water, right? And keep it at that temperature. And we were trying to come up with all these ways to like keep the water temperature from falling. But what we started to notice the moment the water temperature got to about 65 degrees is that all the fish started getting sick.
Mm.
And it was devastating. And what I learned from that was, really truly understand the fish you're trying to raise before you get them, and make sure that you build your system. If you really do want to grow that kind of fish, you build the environment for that fish for the worst case scenario, right? So we were not prepared for the worst case scenario. We thought we would have time, and we've done our calculations and try to figure out how to heat the water. But by the time we were able to get the water heated, all our fish had died because they started developing diseases out of stress, from stress as the water temperature started to lower. So yeah, that was like my big lesson is, you need to understand the fish that you're raising really well and make sure that you can provide the right type of environment for them. Don't just go with fish that other people are telling you to raise. Yeah, it was devastating. It was very devastating to have all those fish die. It was about 1,000.
A plan B.
Yeah. And then we shifted to koi and goldfish the second year, because then we started doing research and thinking, oh, shoot, we should have gone with fish that are more adapted to our climate if we're going to be outdoors and we're not going to be able to heat the water successfully. So let's go with fish that can work, because it also works on the other end. We can't cool the water successfully in the summer either. So we can't go with fish like trout. So it's like going back to the drawing board and saying what fish makes sense for our environment. So the positive side of that is that now I know to do proper research before I really introduce any fish into our aquaponics system. Yeah, that's like.
I love that. It seems like a common theme that you've learned as well, of like, and we hear this a lot of like, or you'll read this online a lot of, tilapia are great for aquaponics. If you're starting an aquaponics farm, start with tilapia, or basil work great for aquaponics, so start there. But one of the things we preach at Agritecture is it's always about your local context, and that can really change from one lot to the next based on native buildings or microclimates. And so it's so important to really consider your local context and make sure that you at least do some experimentation to ensure that whatever your first plan was can work, and if not, you have the plan B to fall back on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so important. And it's not something that we can stress enough.
Yeah. Okay, so now give me one of your happiest memories.
Oh, I think it's always in the summertime when everything is just blooming. Yeah. I really love seeing people's expressions when they walk into the farm. We're kind of like on a dingy street and the front of the farm looks a little sketchy, and then people walk in and they're blown away. That look.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That look I love and cherish so much. I just all the time I'm like, yeah, I see people's faces light up as soon as they turn the corner and they come in, because they're not expecting to see you know, 6-foot tall plants in the system, or like, you know, grass looking things in the system, lemongrass. I think those are my, like, my happy moments on the farm, when people are truly impressed. You know, I want people to think of aquaponics as being awesome. And as soon as people turn the corner and they see all these beautiful plants, I'm like, yeah. I know I don't need to say much after this. They're sold.
Yemi, I really hope that we can have that. I can have that moment this summer.
I hope so too.
Okay, last question. How can people reach out to you if they're curious, if they want to support some of the new projects that you're working on? We didn't get to talk too much about that, but how can people find you, reach out to you, or learn more about your work in Oko Farms?
So definitely people can, we're in a transition now. This is interesting, so bear with me. Our current website is www.okofarms.com. And beginning April 15th, we will be okofarms.org.
Ooh.
Yes. So if you're watching this after April 15th, you will go to okofarms.org. And if you're watching this before April 15th, you will go to okofarms.com. And we will have a list of classes on our website. We're actually about to launch our spring intensive program. We did the winter intensive program for 6 weeks and it went so great. Okay. We're going to launch our spring intensive program. We also have some webinars that will be coming up as well. We just finished 2 webinars last weekend that also, I was so impressed by the number of people who signed up. So we're going to be doing more of that. So our new website will have a full calendar of in-person events. Hopefully we'll be able to be with each other soon. And then also webinars, because I realized that we have a great opportunity to reach people who don't live in New York, and I hadn't considered that before. Our last class, online class, had people from Texas and I think it's North Carolina, and a bunch of people from New Orleans, which is great. So we'll be doing the webinars throughout the year as well. And we'll have other ways for people to support it. We're now a nonprofit, so we are accepting donations. Yay. And especially now accepting donations to help build our new site. We're building a new site that's gonna have way more opportunities for education on the farm and allow us to grow even more food and do more research.
Amazing. All right, well, I'm looking forward to coming and visiting.
Yes,
when we can leave our homes.
Yeah, when it's safe to leave our homes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for chatting, Yemi.
You for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.